Hello, Internet world. Daniel the Wizard here with the Dryftwood podcast. I found this cool thing that does music on here. I don't know if you guys can hear, but I can. So, anyways, welcome to Dryftwood Weekly Live. Today, we're going to be talking to the most recent guest that I had on, author K.M. West. So, she'll be jumping in shortly, and we'll get to talk on that. But anyway, so I'll stop the music. That's that. But let's see. If you guys want to be able to comment and things like that, it's through StreamYard. So for me to be able to see the comments, I believe you have to agree to something or another. I'm not entirely sure on that, but anyways, yeah. So that's during the live stream. So most recent episode. Oh, it was super awesome. Kind of a new era of Driftwood, a new thing. Working on really just working on the craft of podcasting better. So I believe that KM is here, so I'll go ahead and bring her in. Howdy.
Hi, how's it going?
And ladies and gentlemen, this is KM West. So I'm going to go ahead before we get too far into it. Okay. I actually didn't read any more of the book, and that is my fault. But
it's been a crazy week, though, right? Like I feel like
yeah,
it's been a lot.
So after we recorded, I left that day, and then I went to help my sister where my sister was living, and and then the next day drove to Oklahoma, and then the next day unloaded and drove back home. And then the next next day I had a recording with another guest. And then the kid stuff in between and all that. Really, it just became a busier week than anticipated. It was good though. It went by really fast, which is not that great. But anyways, so here we are. We made it to Monday. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make this live stream happen tonight.
Sure.
So how are you? How's it going? How are you doing?
It's going well. It's going really well. We had a crazy weekend too. It was all good things. My youngest daughter turned 1 over the weekend, so we had a big
happy birthday, youngest daughter.
Yeah, right. So we had a big party with family and friends, and they all came in, and a lot of folks stayed here. So the house was just kind of crazy and filled with people for a few days, which was awesome. And then tonight, my kids are all downstairs. So if you hear like ambient unicorn sounds, that's my children.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, look, I'm not going to tell you my situation with my children because it might be irresponsible. I'm just kidding. It's not irresponsible. But
the dogs are watching them. I mean, they're in charge.
Yeah, they can take care of themselves, even the 1-year-old.
Yeah, well, that's what the bigger kids are for, right?
Exactly. Look, once they get to a certain age, they do become helpful.
Yeah, 3, 4.
Yeah, depending on your culture,
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, otherwise I'm doing really well. Happy to be here.
So, anyways, give the audience what's the book? What is the book?
What is the book? Okay, so in a war-scarred American South, 2 Romani American brothers, Lash and Ander, are basically spinning their wheels, hunting these creatures that seem to have emerged after the war. And they stumble across a woman called Liv, that their paths kind of cross serendipitously, and as a result they become hyper fixated on the idea of her being the solution to this prophecy that they had failed before. Meanwhile, she is trying to find a brother who has gone missing, and cares exactly not at all about their belief system or a concept of prophecy or anything like that. So, hijinks ensue. It's like a really dramatic hiking trip, filled with
a really dramatic hiking trip. I like that.
Yeah. Because they have to go. So it starts in Danville, up in the Carolinas, or in the Appalachian Shadow is what that area is called, following the war, and then they kind of migrate down to and around Atlanta. So there's a lot of time on the road different cultures.
So as far as the setting of the book, did you do quite a bit of research as far as the areas and significant parts of areas that one may travel through? So what are some interesting things that you discovered in your research for some of those things that you weren't expecting to see?
Sure. Actually, so one of the things that's interesting, I did get a chance to go there at one point, just by virtue of bad luck, kind of, or fate or serendipity or whatever you want to call it. My husband and I were trying to fly to Asheville, North Carolina, and our flight in Atlanta, like our connecting flight from Atlanta, got canceled. So we ended up renting a car and having to drive almost exactly the path that like they take in that direction. So we went in the middle of the night, so the trees were real spooky, and all of that was just coincidental. I'd already written it in the book, so that was kind of fun to get to see it.
Look, is that art imitating, or is that
absolutely
art?
Life imitates art, for sure. And so, but there are a few key things in the book that really do exist. So the hotel that the book starts with is modeled off of a real hotel in Danville. You can see it on Google Maps. They travel down the highway and cross the Yadkin River, and that is actually there. And the crossing that's described in the book is one where they've got like the railroad ties and then the highway, and they're trying to cross all that, and that's real. And then there is the North Carolina Finishing Company, I think is what it's called, and they had these two water towers originally. That have since, I think still stand, even though the quarry around them is gone. So that part is also just fictionalized into the story. So so like that I tried to keep accurate. I did a lot of mapping to see how long it would take people to walk that. To give myself an idea of how much time we would need. And then of course things like water. So I had to kind of map out streams and rivers and figure out what would be a realistic likelihood of them finding water and things like that. So
that's look, that's really, that's a lot of effort to go into, and I'm going to be honest with you, that's probably why I don't like to do anything that's would want to write anything that's like that, because look, that just seems like a lot more work than I want to do.
Sure.
But it seems like you've actually gotten a couple of skills, it seems like, in figuring some of these things out.
Hypothetically, I have skills. So it's one of those things where I joke that, in the event of a disaster situation, I'm going to be practically useless. But if you need information, like if you're curious on what it would take to establish a rabbit farm for stew rabbits, or if you're like wanting to know, how do you brush your teeth? I'm your girl. I've got a wealth of useless information right now on how to survive in the wilderness. I haven't tried any of it.
You know what? That information, though, you have to think about this. I'm somebody that would consider myself skillful in some of those things.
Sure.
I'm dangerous if I have information.
Right.
So there's a lot of value in at least having an idea as to what could be possible with that. Because look, if you have
Wikipedia,
what's possible. Like if you don't have any parameters, how do you visualize the capabilities of that, right? So, the knowledge is very valuable. Do not discredit it, because just because you haven't physically practiced it doesn't mean that you can figure it out.
I need strategic partnerships in the apocalypse is what I'm looking for. But I will say it's funny you ask about the location, because it's one of the things about the book is that it is technically it's post-apocalyptic in nature, but it's not really an apocalypse. And I feel like both when I was trying to query the novel and then my publisher, my publishing house, we've kind of struggled with the term apocalyptic, because while it's funny and it's used very loosely in the book, the situation's not like Mad Max. It's it doesn't look like a Mad Max apocalypse. It's more of a wilderness survival situation. So, I think that's why the definition is, in a war-scarred American South, because we make sure, we want to evoke pine trees and not, wasteland. So it's kind of an interesting energy, that it is in fact following a giant war. So, the earth is definitely scarred, but it's not, it's more just isolated, and a lot of trees, a lot of spooky woods, around.
So I do got a question, because I heard something the other day about like CO2. This is not, I don't know anything about this. This makes me think of it. This is how I do things. So if so more CO2 in the atmosphere means that typically you have more greenery, because the trees, the grasses and things like that would have to, absorb some of that CO2. But if an extended period of time after quite a catastrophic, maybe not this level of war, but something quite catastrophic, I think that some of that might like become like Mad Max in a sense, in some ways, because of the lack of population, the lack of emissions, the lack of things like that. So I do think that you would have some counter to that. I know it has nothing to do with your story. Just
no, you're spot on. And one of the things, so the book is set 15 years after the war.
It's still pretty recent. Like that's still like, that's right. A very lively memory of what happened.
Yes, absolutely. And that was strategic too. My characters are all they span age. So the main characters in this book at the start of it are 27, 33, 38, and 49. I think 48 or 49. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted.
Hey, that's my demographic.
There you go, right? But I wanted each person to have been in a different stage of their life at the time of collapse, because I wanted to explore that generational effect on people based on not only their age when it happened, but also how their relationships form. So one of the partnerships in this book is Liv and her pseudo father Carrion. And so the relationship dynamic that they are both adults, right? She's a 27-year-old woman and he's a 49-year-old man, and he took her under his wing when she was just 12, which is how old she was when the bombs went off. And so their relationship, she's still kind of sheltered. They've moved out onto the road, and she's got a lot of practical skills as far as like they've lived on a farm for a long time. But in this situation, she is in a new environment. She's living on the road. Carrion hasn't been on the road in 20 years or 15 years, I guess. So, it's still new for him too, but at the same time, they're kind of learning it together. But their dynamic is one that is still like that's set based on her being a 12-year-old and him being an adult, even though.
Yeah. So the relationship being from that point.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So, well, I think it's interesting you bring up you want to have the generational thing, because you called your book in the podcast recording trauma informed. You would say it's trauma informed.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think having maybe the generations, it really shows like again, like we talked about in the recording, a perspective on how their experiences in life and versus their relationship with the occurrence of the war or whatever. And so like the people that are more leather skinned, that have been through more, are probably going to see it a bit differently than someone that was a child when the experience happened.
That's exactly right.
That's a very broad, like that's a lot to try to do within characters. So
it is a lot, but I love it, and I think that's part of it. I do it because I love it. Same thing with the research and the walking. Like, I'm like, how long would it take me? Just nitpicky because I want it to feel real. And if there is like a period of time where it feels like it drags for them, I want to make sure that the audience feels that same feeling of, oh my gosh, we've been walking forever. Like, I want that to come across. So, trying to illustrate that you can't
not to the point that they close the book though.
No, not to the board, but you don't want it to just be like, oh, we're like fresh foot waking up in the morning. Like, no, they've been hiking for 6 days. Their feet definitely ache. Like, this is, the circumstances have changed for them. So, yeah, so that's one thing. And then the other thing, I was going to say about the environment. Yeah, so this is about 15 years after, and following the war, there's a period of cold years where the kind of fog has blocked out the sun and changed the climate a little bit. And so you see, and so you do see some of that kind of strangeness of plant life has changed, and then people have gotten resourceful. So there's certain things that are planted, not in this book, but when they later get to Texas, there's like a whole swath of bamboo forest, because bamboo grows quickly. And
I gotta read so I can at least get to Texas now. Damn, I gotta get the other book out.
Yeah, East Texas. So the sequel in this book takes place a lot of it takes place in East Texas. Obviously, that's where I'm from. So, yeah.
My
So that's
stomping grounds. Them's my stomping grounds.
exactly. So, yeah. But by the time they get there, there's a spot they get to that's just a bamboo forest where somebody's taken basically bamboo from their yard, and just.
I've seen it happen in real life. I've seen it happen.
That's so fast. So that's kind of the idea. But anyway,
it's really cool. It seems as though like you've explored like a bunch of different like so you're having to visualize the entire world, right? You're having to visualize what's on the news or whatever, right? You're having to visualize like occurrences in the time that maybe don't directly relate to the story, but maybe they affect the characters in the story, right?
Yeah.
And so like I don't know. So that's really look. I said earlier that I don't know that I could write fiction because or the things that you're having to do with the work. But I realize I'm a research junkie. I love researching as long as I'm motivated, as long as I have a reason to research it. But if I feel like it's work, man, I probably wouldn't do it so willingly. I have to get better at that. But with you pointing out like all of these different things in the story, I'm just like super interested. So who are authors that have inspired you? Because there's a complexity to what you're presenting as far as the story. It's not just your run-of-the-mill simple trope of this, that, and another.
Yeah. It's funny you ask. The inspiration for this novel is kind of all over the place. One of the first books I read that probably brought me into the genre was The Haunting of Hill House. Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House. And it was the first book I ever read that scared me. I read it as a kid. I was probably 11 or 12. And yeah, and like the concept, I didn't quite understand fully the unreliable narrator aspect, but I was very interested in the experience that this woman was having, Eleanor was having in the house. And so I really like bought into the genre there. And then like if you want to take like a snippet of who I was at that moment in my life, it's like 11 and 12 years old. I read The Haunting of Hill House. My dad bought me Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles for my 12th birthday because he was like, don't tell your mother, but I think you will love this. And
that's like, a cool dad. That's a cool dad.
So I apologize because I'm probably going to watch this. Bad news. But anyway, sorry, Dad. But yeah, so he kind of slipped me that one. So the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles, that was a big influence for me. A friend of mine accidentally picked up the bell jar for AR points. And so that like took me into the concept of like depression and suicidal tendencies and how that would shape a person. So that was kind of some heavy reading. And then obviously the Left Behind series was another one of my reads. So the world was ending there and people had been abandoned, obviously, for the apocalypse. So it was kind of a weird mix. I feel like I'm still kind of that person, like that just sort of that just evolved into where I am now. But yeah, it's weird. It's a weird mix, but probably most influential books would be Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried. I read that in high school as a part of my English curriculum. And it was the first time that had ever occurred to me that like soldiers in war are effectively just young boys, right? And that kind of led into Slaughterhouse-Five and other stories along those lines where I was like, oh, wow, these are just kids my age who are not responsible and not emotionally mature, being put through these war type scenarios. And I feel like that also made me interested in the experience that people have that is outside of my scope. And so like, I have never been to war, but I know people who've been to war. And so trying to understand like what that experience looks like for them, I feel like The Things They Carried was there's actually a chapter in this book called The Things They Carried, kind of an homage to that. So yeah, that's a lot. I don't know if that was a succinct answer.
No, that was awesome. So essentially the book that you read with you in your high school literature syllabus, right?
Yep. Yeah.
What was it?
The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. Mm-hmm. And it's how to tell a true war story, which is sort of an interesting concept because it's the idea behind it is that there is no such thing as a true war story, and that sometimes you have to fictionalize something in order to get the experience across in an accurate and true way. So
like you're trying to build the emotion that was there as well. So sometimes that means like
the
emphasizing
details.
something to that would capture a normal person that necessarily isn't battle trained.
That is exactly right. So emphasizing the emotion and the experience in order to give the impression of what it was like, the impression of the experience. And that's how you tell a true war story. And so I feel like if anything it influences this book, it's probably that, and then Haunting of Hill House. Those two kind of as a weird mix, and here we are.
Well, so I think it's interesting that out of that mix of things that you write this, and we talked on the podcast about why you became an author, and you had said that essentially that you had just always felt that that was something that you were doing, and then you finally decided to take it serious after a question in time where you were just like, if I died today, what will I regret not doing?
Right.
And writing a book, and how many books have you written?
So I have this one is complete, and I keep looking at it. I mean, for reference,
bring it up yourself. Let everyone see it.
Like, yeah, and it's sitting right here. So if I keep staring at it because it's kind of my like, I don't know, comfort object here. Like, oh,
just FYI, guys, she actually did the cover art as well. So that's her stuff.
Yeah, so I'm a graphic designer. I do covers for albums, for books, other things. So available for hire. Find me on my website. But yeah, so I've written this book and it's complete. I have written I'm about 80% through the sequel to this book. I am probably 30 or 40% through the third book in the series. And then I'm about 65% finished with the prequel of this series. So there is,
well, that's a lot of irons in the fire. I would suggest finish it.
Yeah, there's a lot of books all at once. And it's funny that you mentioned earlier about how the book kind of explores different people's experiences, what's on the news and things like that. The prequel to this book is actually set, the main character of this story, who is Liv, the prequel is actually about her mother. So Liv is a baby in the book. And so it's interesting because I do get to play a little bit of that. And there's some very interesting dynamics there, that just things like her mom running the faucet water hot in order to fill up the tea kettle, which is like a thing that Liv distinctly remembers in this series because it's such a waste of water that but it's something that people do now like all the time.
So it ties something that happens in this book to an older memory.
Right. Yeah.
Like make it more, okay, cool. Like, so it'll base it. All right. I see what you're doing. I like it.
Yeah. So it's been really great. But yeah, so the prequel is rooted in Filipino mythology, actually. I'm getting to explore some things about that because that's not been something that I was raised culturally immersed within. My grandmother's from the Philippines, but our culture there on that side was not
wasn't present here or with you.
Right, exactly. So this has been
we have a comment from Nancy. She says, sorry I'm late. I was referring to Tom Robbins. What do you think of his writing in respect to what you're talking about? I'm from Bennington, Vermont. I have read Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House and other books.
Yeah.
Can you see that comment? Can you see that comment?
Yeah, I can see it. I'll be honest, I haven't read Tom Robbins, but I have had more than one person refer his work to me. So it's on my, what I call your TBR, which would be my to be read pile, which is, like I mentioned, my daughter just turned 1. And so I feel like for the past probably 2 years, my to be read pile has just grown exponentially because the time and focus that I need to sit down and actually read a book is limited. I've got other things like, all the coals in the fire. So, but he's pretty high on my list. I've heard that there's a lot of similarities there, and so I need to explore that. But, so thank you for your question, Nancy. I really appreciate you joining.
Yeah, since everybody that is here has been here and will watch this later, thank you for joining. And also don't forget to share this. We're going to be here for a little while longer, so share it. Let everybody know that we're in here talking about stuff. Come in, leave some comments. We're on YouTube and Facebook. If you want to leave some comments, we'll be happy to engage with them. Otherwise, we're just going to keep chitty-chatting about the things we're chitty-chatting about.
Yeah.
So you're a mother We've made that very clear. As much detail as you want to go in that, I'm willing to, just to give a background of yourself.
Yeah, so I am a mom of two small, very independent women. They're aged 4 and 1 as of this past weekend. So two little girls. The first one I knew was a girl from we didn't find out till she was born, but we knew for sure she was a girl. The second one surprised us. We really thought she was going to be a boy, and so she came out and she was a girl. We were all like, "What? I don't know." But they're both wonderful. Like I said, they're both very independent, which is crazy because they're very young, but they're amazing. They're amazing, and their lives are kind of intrinsically tied to this series too, because I feel like part of my like writing experience happens in like that 2 a.m. window. So a lot of my ideas happen, at nighttime while I'm sleeping, and during that disrupted kind of first year after a baby, where I'm a little bit foggy and I'm still trying to figure out who I am. I often tell people that like when it comes to writing, you have to become the version of yourself that is able to tell your story. And so we talked about this in the podcast about how, when you get further out from a work, it no longer represents you as closely. And I think that's because we're always kind of in the process of becoming. And so, with my first daughter, this first book very much was part of my process of becoming in that postpartum window. And then the prequel that I'm working on is very much the second daughter, and that same process is what's being captured in them. So they're both highly instrumental. And then obviously my husband's been super supportive, which I need to give him major props for that, because like when you have a hobby and he would just be like, if you want to go write. And like, there was no return on that investment, or no guarantee of any return on that investment, right? Like he didn't even know if I was good at it, like he was like, I just know you like to do it. So
he believed in you.
Right. So I have to give him credit, because he was like, even with my first daughter, even with this first book, he was very supportive of like, yeah, if you want to go spend the day in a coffee shop and work on your book, like it just, like I said, there was no guarantee that there was anything that was going to come of it. So I really appreciate his
definitely trying to get rid of the excuses for you too.
Right. Because I'm pretty notorious for that. Like if anybody's holding me back, it's me. That's for sure.
Yeah, and so like you were an IT professional, and you own and operate a gym with your husband. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. That's all true. Yeah. So we kind of did his. Let's see. We came out of college, and we moved to where we live now, for following my career, and his career sort of just like bloom where you're planted. I feel like he was a personal trainer, and then he met the right people that were really invested in his vision and his style of leadership, and they were like, hey, I would like to open a gym, but basically need a managing partner. And so that's our partner Jeremiah Williams, and my husband Daniel just took a leap of faith, and it has grown and blossomed. I think we are on oh my gosh, we're coming up on year 7, year 8.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And I am very grateful for that experience, because in that situation, I was very much like the supporting partner of that venture. And then now, as I've started my own creative design business, there is a lot of lessons that were learned vicariously that I'm getting to kind of circumvent on this side of things, which is really nice. But yeah, so my husband and his partner own the gym. I joke that I am IT and emotional support. That's my job within the company. I'm also certified 200-hour yoga instructor. So I used to teach yoga prior to my most recent daughter being born. And so hopefully I'll get back into that. If you scour YouTube, there's some videos of me doing yoga out there. So like it exists.
4 days in a row I've done yoga.
Yeah.
4 days in a row.
That's awesome.
Look, I get on these little spells, and I'll like something will happen, and I find trouble getting back on it. But like I've had some resiliency recently, and I've been able to like not be deterred because I missed, and just like, oh well, I just get it today. And so like I also try not to feel like I have to make up for what I missed too, because that's already lost.
No, it's not lost. It's just part of the journey, I think.
Yeah, I can't do anything with it anymore. It's just done.
Right.
I can't. It's gone.
It's a sunk cost. Gone.
So Nancy left another comment. It says, "I'll go back to the tape of this. I'll get your book. By the way, I know mothers too."
Thanks, Nancy. I appreciate it. I appreciate the support. Absolutely. Hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully it delivers.
Look, you put effort into it, and you know, it's. I think that well, look, I read the reviews on the Amazon thing, and either you are really nice to those people and gave them things, or you're a pretty good author, right? And so one of the things that I remember us talking about, I don't remember if we recorded it or not, because we've actually talked a couple times now, and they're starting to mix together.
Agreed.
But like, you had said something about. Oh man, I can't remember. Now I have a different thought in my head, so I'll just go with that one. So this isn't to quote you, but we were having a discussion about both of us having pandemic babies. Right?
Yeah.
Babies during the pandemic. And so during the conversation, a comment was made about they're just built different.
They're built different. They are.
Since we've had that conversation, I've been having more observations of my daughter. She's 16 months, I think. Yeah, so she's like just the 16 months, right? So, and seeing all of these things that are going on, I'm just like, maybe there's something to that, because look, maybe girls develop passion, boys, whatever, but she's far more engaged at the age that she is than any of my other children have been. And maybe that's because they're siblings. I don't know. But there's something different.
Yeah. Yeah. My youngest started walking at 8 months. Which is just an insane. I mean, my oldest we thought was ahead of the curve because she was walking at like 10, I think. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's so advanced. Now this new one's like 8 months standing up. She can do stairs. She's and I'm like, what? And like she rolled over really early, which is the kind of thing that you only ever learn when you think they can't roll. Like you're safe here, and then you're like, just kidding. You apparently know how to roll, off of things. And so that's how
I'm not going to say how I know that, but
no, I mean that's how we learned she could do stairs. Unfortunately, we learned that the hard way. We did not realize that stairs were in her portfolio until she decided to demonstrate that for us. So obviously she's fine. But yeah, they're built different. It's it's interesting. I think oh gosh. I think is it Gandalf who says that, we're born for the times we live in. That's going to be a real rough quote. There's going to be some Lord of the Rings out there who are just like shame and dishonor upon you and the house and the fandom. But the idea of nobody chooses the times that they're born, and we just have to kind of live in them. And I think I'm curious to see why this generation might be super babies. What that looks like.
Yeah, look, if we have superpowers, it might be from this generation. Like if that starts to happen, I think we might start seeing some. Look, if life imitates art, man, there sure is a lot of art suggesting that it might be. Maybe my fingers are crossed. I'm not flipping the camera off. My fingers are crossed.
I will say it's funny you say that because so this book originally was supposed to debut in 2020, and it's kind of a weird and eerie place to be when you write dystopia in the middle of like a pandemic and a very tumultuous election season, and like
you really got to do some self-evaluation if that's
there's a lot. Yeah, and I've got so the second book, it's mentioned in the first book for sure. So you got proof it's there. But the second book also deals with a group of people that are called the Patriota, and they're kind of through the Midwest region. And so they are kind of this militant, ideological group that it's a Christian rooted group. And I'm pretty sure that's also perhaps the group that stormed the Capitol in January. Like I was like, oh yikes, this got like weirdly specific. My bad. So So my friends joke that I actually am prophetic and I'm doing a bad job. I need to put the pin down.
Well, look, maybe that's why some people have issue with like. So I'm thinking back olden times. I'm just thinking here. So like maybe that was part of the issue with people thinking that like writing and stuff like that was spell casting and magic and things like that because
I mean,
I have a belief that that the more the whole conscious thinks of everyone, like everybody included, thinks of something, the more likely that becomes reality.
Yeah.
Right. But the other thing is there's always a variable that you never expected that completely changes it.
Yeah.
Always. Every time. So think about the technology with these phones and things like that. Like I'm sure that they weren't trying to develop this. This is a circumstance of trying to discover other things. Like well, maybe we can do this with what we've discovered. So like, I don't know. It's just a lot to think about, and to think about like way back in time, whenever maybe they didn't have everybody could read and everybody could write, things like that. There's some mysticism to being able to say that you wrote something down, and it's like that's uncomfortably close to what I wrote.
Right.
The Simpsons.
Yeah.
The Simpsons.
Yeah, The Simpsons, right? So it's funny you say all of those things. So there's a portion of the book here where one of the characters is kind of trying to describe magic, the concept of magic. What is magic, or how does it work? And effectively the equivalent that's made is that it's like prayer, right? So when a bunch of people focus their energy on one thing, it just becomes more likely. Like we're energetic beings, and so you kind of aim all of that energy towards something. And it's the same idea behind why a vision board works, right? Like it keeps it in your consciousness. If you keep a vision board of what you want to see for your life, you start making incremental changes toward that in conjunction with being able to see it for your future, and you start treating your future like that's the future you have. And so I think you kind of pull your future toward you even as you're propelling toward it.
I think with the vision board specifically, I think I'm not challenging the idea of the vision board. I think it's useful. However, I think people can apply that incorrectly. I think if your desires and the things that you want aren't pure, aren't things that make you whole, aren't things that build you better, then like it doesn't work.
Sure. Like if you just want money, like I think you, so from a religious background, from a religious standpoint, right, you pray with your heart and not your mind. And so I think there's, you might think what you want is money, right? But what you're looking for is security, or what you're looking for is acceptance, or you're looking for love, or all of these other things that you're equating to what it would be like if you had money, or what it would be like if you owned that car, or what it would be like if you
what the money would give you, what it would provide, that thinking that the money would provide those things that you actually do want. And it does provide some of those things.
Sure, it sure can. But I think to your point, right, like that is the desire is coming from the mind when you're focusing on something like, oh, I want money. Like that's what your mind equates to the need. But your heart is asking for a totally different need, and we're often pretty disconnected from what that looks like. So
that's a good perspective. I appreciate that. So I was talking to somebody earlier today about like being the best example. Like we were talking about the Bible. We were talking about some things in the Bible, not to get into religion, but just we were talking about this for the, but and I'd given that I think that being able, so they were talking about wanting to be able to let people know about the Word of God. And I gave a suggestion that I think the most appropriate way one can do that, and I think this is with anything, is to practice that and be the example. And so when people say, man, that's a good dude right there, they'll know, why are you good? Well, because I stand with these principles, and these are why I stand with these principles, and so on and so forth. And so I think what people miss, though, with all of those things, is I think that kindness and caring has to be part of the equation. It has to be part of it. And I think a lot of people actually miss on that little bit of part. And I think it causes them to fall flat on their face. But like you said, their heart, they're not speaking with their heart. So it just made me think of that.
Yeah, well, God is love, right? That is the statement you see across the board. So I think you're spot on there. Or what is it? They will know we are Christians by our love, I think is the quote. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Not to get too far into that, but it
no.
made me think of it. So
Yeah,
within your book, do
yeah.
your characters have any crisis of faith where they're engaging in any of that, where they're contemplating their own fate
Uh,
within?
yeah, absolutely. That's actually, I mean, belief. There's an entire chapter called belief, and it takes place in a church. And
Nice.
yeah, and one of the things that was also based on a dream. I dreamt that
Oh,
I
by
was.
the way, we haven't told the listeners here, but she had the little magic fairy dust as being an author. I would call it. Sorry, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah, no, I think you're
diminish
spot
it.
on.
I don't want to diminish what it is.
No, I don't take credit for this. I am simply the voice of the story that descends upon me. So I don't get to claim it. But yeah, no, that came to me in a dream, running through a church, trying to escape from a church, being chased through a church. And so I got to retrofit that to my own experience. I grew up in the church. And my mom is a minister, and so kind of shaping a chapter around that and what it looks like. And one of the things is that, they hole up inside, and there's like a painting of Daniel in the lion's den on the wall. It's like a children's room, and that's part of the discussion that they have. And that's a nice thing too about writing, is that you have an opportunity to not just tell with the words that are happening, but you can very much use the setting to tell the story too. So whatever you are, in my opinion, that's the way to do it, right? Is if you can make the setting emphasize the conversation, then the conversation feels more natural, and then also you can add layers to it. So um, anyway, yeah. So there's a chapter there, and the discussion there around belief systems and what do people believe in and why does it work, and how. And I say magic because magic is so loosely used in this book, and there's not really any sense of magic in this book that's not something that somebody already believes in now. So there's just different sets of beliefs that sort of interact with one another, and where they overlap. um, and I don't know, it's been really fun for me. I'm a real like culture anthropology nerd, and I get real into it, and I'm real into like religious studies. So if you're ever wanting to talk about that kind of stuff, I'm here for it. But
Well, you probably have a pretty unique perspective considering raisings.
yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. But yeah, so one of the conversations they have, right, is that um Ander Pharaoh, so one of the Pharaoh brothers, is the recipient of this great prophecy. He's supposed to fulfill this great prophecy. And so the discussion that they're having is like, what what is the likelihood of that, for one? And then on top of that, and one of the questions throughout the series, every one of the books is what does it look like to be someone who is called to something? Because you hear these stories, right? So the Prophet Muhammad, in the Quran, is he hears the voice of God and then is like, I have lost my damn mind. Like he panics. He's like, I'm gonna throw myself off this mountainside. Obviously, I am crazy. Which I feel like is a very human reaction to what I would experience, like if you heard the voice of God. And you see that kind of time and time again. I think over the different iterations of our religious texts, because all of them have been translated, all of them have been handwritten, several they've been edited by the person who has made the translation. So there's a lot of variation across those texts, but you can see in certain versions where there's this real humanity to these responses. Mary, people being terrified of angels, like there's a real like, I don't know about that. And so that's part of the thing that I try to explore too, is that, the weight of that, and how easy it would be to be like, maybe I don't believe in this. And if I don't, then all of it comes crumbling down. So like if you
Yeah,
build your
look,
life around it.
pretending it's not real doesn't make it not real. And
Right,
that's a lot of things in life in general. Like
right.
just pretending it doesn't exist doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And pretending like it doesn't affect you doesn't mean it doesn't affect you.
That's exactly right.
Because you remain naive doesn't mean you get to blame other people.
No, that's exactly right. And so, yeah, but even so, both does belief make it real? I think is kind of the main question that is asked through this. Is to your point about energy being focused on something. Does enough people believing in something make it real? Does belief make something real? Does an idea spread? And by spreading that idea, do you make things happen? To your point about, is the written word also spellcasting? There's a lot of questions there, and word in general, right? Communication and language is the beginning of time. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. And that's like one of those things that you see thematically over the cross, is like, oh, and of course, again, back to mentioned in the podcast, people who write books always put in libraries. So like, it's possible that you see some author reflection there when you see these oral stories.
Yeah,
that it can be about talking or about writing. It's about that communication piece.
And that's the thing that like I like to point out to people is like it doesn't negate the value of the stories, though. It doesn't negate the value of the lessons learned within the text.
Agreed.
And so I think that when people are really closed-minded about what the value can be, even with other, like you were talking about across the board, they all have a similar approach to things.
Or a crisis, really, like that moment of faith where you're called to do something. I think is kind of a crisis for everyone involved.
Yeah, and and I think that I don't know. It's just interesting to think about because for a long time I viewed it a certain way, right? I didn't grow up. In time of crisis of life, transitioned from in family made a decision to start going to church more regularly. Went to church more regularly, was involved in all of those things. I didn't really buy in, but I didn't not believe it. I was just like, okay, cool, whatever.
Sure, it's what you did. It's checkbox. Yeah.
And then like I grew up, I got older, and then I became pretty agnostic as far as like I don't really know. I don't
right.
I don't care actually. I don't, and so then the transition to now to where I feel like I've understood that those words mean different things to different people. Right? I had to find what those words meant to me, my personal relationship with those words and the things that those words represent. So it's been this whole thing of transition to like, man, I thought that I knew at every stage, so I might be wrong still, right? So
I always come back to that. I always think I know. I always think I'm wise and like evolved, and I'm like, oh nope, had no idea.
And I think the thing that I realize in all of this is the best thing that I know is really that I don't know. It's like, it's okay. I don't have to know. And it's not my obligation to know. But and so like talking about creativity, because on the podcast, we talked about that a little bit, but to get into it specifically, we talked about on the podcast, I had said that I just can't give up the process, the creative process. See, I've been stagnant in my life with like not getting it past I haven't gotten things to completion very often.
Yeah. Neither did Da Vinci. So give yourself some grace on that.
I'm addicted to the process. I'm addicted to getting involved with those things because I really want to know and I really want to learn and I know I can do it. And then then that's it.
Again, so Da Vinci did not finish almost every commission he was paid to do, if it's any consolation. Like he's like we think of him as the Renaissance man and like one of the most.
I don't want to be famous for not completing shit. I'm just being honest with you. I don't.
Well, but is he famous for that? I feel like that's not what Da Vinci's famous for. He's not famous for not finishing things.
But the amount of detail involved in his stuff, it would make sense why it was never completed.
I think he just got bored with it. I think he just like hyper focused on the things he cared about, probably, and then just
he's probably like autistic. And
maybe
what we would call autistic today, and probably high functioning. And
oh no!
Failure. There's a scary face on there. You look struck. Anyway, so I guess here I am. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's. Anyways, I don't know. So so far having quite an interesting conversation. Been running at 50 minutes. So let me see what's going on here. Let's see. All right, well, let's go back. Oh, I'm still here. All right, well, um, all right, cool. Well, now we have confirmation that it's not me. Look. All right, so anyways, Houston, yes, thank you for coming on. Just so you guys don't know, Houston's actually the next guest that's releasing next week, just to put him on the spot right there. Um, Jennifer, thank you so very much for letting me know that it's her, not me. I haven't heard that many times in my life. So here we are. Um, yeah, so I was gonna get in talking about creativity. If she's able to hop back on, that'd be awesome. But I hope everything's all right. So creativity on the podcast episode, I was talking about creativity. I was talking about creativity and creativity being something that I'm it's therapeutic for me in some sense, right? But like I've learned a lot recently because like I started doing the resin tumblers, doing all kinds of stuff, right? Doing soaps. But like I have a lot of things like this close to completion. But like there's something that's keeping me from going like I've always been scared to be commercial or to sell out, not really sell out, but to just become one of the money chasers, the people that are just trying to get a couple of bucks, right? I've always been really scared of that because that's not what drives me. It's not what motivates me, and it's not what pushes me. What pushes me and motivates me is being able to think, being able to be creative. I just haven't really figured out how to monetize that well. This is that best effort. But anyways, I really appreciate all you guys joining in Houston. And I'm glad I finally caught the live. It never shows up in my algorithms. Look, man, maybe if you interact with my stuff more, it might show up in your algorithm. I'm just kidding. I don't know how they work. But thank you so much for hopping on here this time and catching it because look, I'm trying to do this every Monday night, 6:30, 7 o'clock. Oh, here we go. She's back. She's back. She's back. So here we are. She's back. Howdy.
I'm so sorry. My phone actually died, and so now we are like sitting next to my bed.
Nice. Like, I'm gonna tell you, from my end, what I saw was like a frozen, like panic face, and I was like,
"Oh no!" It was the apocalypse. The apocalypse descended upon me, and that's it. That's how the story ends.
all right. So just to let you know,
buy my book for more.
Houston Ball. He's actually the next guest coming on the podcast. He's smart. He says that he caught the live. He's happy to finally be here. And then Jennifer said that it was your connection, not mine, because I was questioning whether it was the connection of you or me, because I panicked too, because sometimes it's me. But I think I was happy to hear that it was you, not me.
It was me. It was me, guys. I'm so sorry.
And then,
also, big thank you to Jennifer for introducing us. I'm so appreciative.
Yeah, hold on. Look, let's bring this up. Look, Jennifer, thank you so many. So look, Jennifer was very bold. So on my Facebook page, it just does what it normally does, and I'm just minding my own business, doing what I normally do, trying to stay. And then like I get a notification, and it says, "I don't know if this is what you're looking for your podcast, but this is my cousin." And I was like, interesting. I didn't actually watch it then. It took me like 20 minutes. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop whatever I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and watch it. I watched it and I messaged you immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. I was very grateful. I had actually. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And it's funny that you say that because the subscribers to my newsletter would have just gotten this. By the way, you can subscribe to my newsletter. You can go to my website. It's kmwestwrites.com. But they got a little insight today on how I ended up here, and it was sort of a like a moment of bravery, I think. So for a long time, I wrote, but I didn't really consider it like real, like I'm like, oh, I write, but people be like, oh, she wrote a book, and I'd be like, oh, like no, don't like, oh, don't tell people that. So only recently have I started to buy in, and one of the characters in my book actually says, you have to believe in it before anybody else will. And I think I finally kind of reached a point where in a moment of bravery, I was like, you know what, I'm going to put this on my personal page, not just my book page. Cause I figured if you like books, you'll follow my book page. And if you don't, then you're not interested. But so I did. I put it on my personal page and was like, "Hey guys, I am trying to get this thing off the ground. My baby is now 1 and kind of weaning, and I have some emotional energy here to spend. So if anybody knows anybody who does podcasts or magazines or whatever, I want to do interviews. Y'all find me." And of course, Jennifer was like, "Yeah, I got a guy."
I want to say, I really do appreciate the time that you've given me. It's been all valuable. Look, it's been very insightful for me as well, because I'm always intrigued with things. Look, like I said, the creative process. I'm in the process of writing a book. I'm gonna complete it. I have to, right? I've talked about it too many times to not complete it now. People are gonna hold me accountable.
That's good.
Right?
That's what you're gonna be.
Talking to you, like, I kind of have a little more courage to maybe expand out of what I think that I can actually do, because, like, I mean, you could get a little wild in the fiction, right? You can really, I don't know. I think it's quite interesting, and I really do appreciate it. It's motivated the hell out of me. Pun intended.
Right.
But no, I really appreciate the time that you've spent. Genuinely do. And drop all of your things. Let everyone know where they can find you. I do think I put it in the description of the episode for the podcast.
Yeah.
But if I need to make any corrections, let me know. But anyways, yeah, drop it. Let everybody know what they need to do.
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at KM_West_. So there's a second one on the end, and that's KM as in Kilo Mike, and then West like the direction. And then my website is KMWestWrites, WRITES.com. And I'm on Facebook at KM West Creative, all one word. So those are the places to find me. And yeah, to your point, a friend of mine gave me a lot of courage on this one. It's my friend Stephen Wells. He has a band we met in college, and his thing is like, you have to have the audacity to like believe in yourself. Like, yeah. And like, I right. And what I think of audacity, right, is in like, oh, that's how audacious. But like ultimately the true root of the word, right, is that you have to boldly believe, back to that sort of sense of belief that you have to believe in it before anybody else will. So yeah, anyway, that's oh, hey, awesome. Thank you, Houston. I just saw that you followed me on Twitter. I'm a follow back kind of gal, so I'm coming for you as soon as I get off this interview.
Yeah, look, I do appreciate it. I'm gonna call it a night. I think that if you guys haven't already, go check out the podcast episode. It was super, super, super fantastic. We can't give all the secrets about what we talked about. Gotta have a reason for you to go over there. So go check it out. And also don't forget to check out Wild Things Will Roam. That's KM West's book. So I got my copy. I don't know what you guys are waiting for. Go ahead and get your copy as well.
Ebooks are available, guys. I mean, you could have it right this minute. You don't even have to wait.
Look, I got a hard copy, thinking that maybe at some point I might run into the author and maybe she'd sign it. You know what I'm saying? I'm thinking ahead.
I'd be more than happy to do that for you, for sure. More than happy.
Yeah. So, Kay, I really do appreciate it, and to everyone that has listened, and everyone that has watched, and everyone that has commented, I genuinely appreciate it. Don't forget to join us next week with our next guest. Okay. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.